So I want to run through this slideshow with you and just animate some of the material that I've put on here. The actual slideshow is available on Moodle as well, so you can access that at any time. But this will give you some additional notes and information that you can watch and listen to. So the whole point of this presentation, well, there are 2 points really, one of which is to animate your novel to really bring it to life. And the second point is to clarify the ideas for yourself. The more you consolidate your ideas, the more they're like concrete and solidified in your head, then the easier it will be to write the novel come September. All right, so go through this presentation. The purposes are there; they're very, very clear. It's twofold. Most of all, I want to make sure that you're prepared for November. Now, take my word for it. Please, please, please take my word for it. The more prepared you are, the more detail you have in your head, the more detailed outline you have, the easier it will be to write the novel. And it will be very frustrating if you grind to a halt. If you've got a really good outline with lots of detail, you won't grind to a halt at all. So make sure you do that, please. Make sure you fill in all these ideas. Now, there are some things that you should already have done. And you've got to make sure that all these are up on your e-portfolio. This is what I've called the backstory, okay? You should have completed, for instance, the first idea and development should be on your e-portfolio. Where did that idea come from? The opening of the book and the essential conflict should be there. You've done your 60-second pitch. Those are all available on the website, complete with the backgrounds. And the story world you should have put on your e-portfolio. Details of the story world and the key scenes. Now, let's go through those in a little bit more detail. That first idea came from your list of 5. You selected one after the speed dating, remember? You need to be interested in that. If you're not interested in it at this point, if you're not interested in spending like the whole of November with those characters and that plot, then you're getting to your last chance to change it now, okay? When you come to the opening, please, 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 please make sure it's in media res, okay? Start in the middle of things. I don't want any of this long introduction, prologues leading up to it, or backstory to begin with. Backstory can come later if we need it, but start right in the middle of the action, okay? What is this story about? So you need to pitch that for us. You need to make sure you've got that sorted out. Your 60-second pitch is a very, very important tool, and that's already on Moodle. Make sure you email me a background if you haven't already, because that background, choosing a picture, choosing an image for the background to your novel is very important in solidifying your ideas and concretizing them. Think of this presentation that you're going to do as a bit like an extended pitch. The story world has got to be detailed. What you've done so far, most of you, is fairly perfunctory. Go back to the materials that I provided you with on Moodle in that little book behind the green icon, open all that and answer all of those questions. Now, some of them obviously may not be relevant for your particular novel, but you still need to know about them in the story world. You have to have them in the back of your head so that in case they crop up, if they crop up in your novel and you have to write from that perspective, you don't have to slow down and think about it because you already know it or you've got it in your notes. All right? So go back and decide all of those details. The key events, the more detail you have in your key events and the more key events you have, the better. You can always cut them out later on, but it's much more difficult to add them in. So have a long list of key events and gradually flesh them out and make them more detailed. Now remember, you're not writing the story at this point. You're writing in the present tense. In this scene, John comes into the room and he picks up the chair and he hurls it through the window. That's telling me what will happen. You don't write the story yet, but that's the kind of detail that we need. Right, so this presentation, what's this presentation going to look like? Because that was just the backstory. So I'm going to give you these fairly detailed guidelines for the presentation, and then at the end there's a very clear indication of how it's going to be graded, because it is going to be graded. First of all, okay, you need to plan to talk for 4 or 5 minutes, which is kind of about the length of a senior speech. It's not really very long. If you want to go over that, then that's absolutely fine, as long as it's pertinent and as long as it's well structured. But you will lose marks if you come in significantly under that. All right, the content. This is a quick list of the content. There needs to be 5 parts to it. The introduction, you need to tell us about the voice, about what the novel's going to sound like, and I'll go into that in some detail in a moment. You need to tell us about the story world. and you need to give an overview of what is the development of the plot and highlight something that's particularly exciting. Those are the 5 things we need to look at. The introduction needs to be about a minute long, and it should introduce us to the following. What's the story about? Just in a sentence or two, that's all. Keep that bit fairly brief. But I'm really interested in why you chose this material. Where did this material come from? What you're interested in this material. And then following that, I need to know about the main character. You need to tell me about this character and what's interesting about this character and why this character is worth spending some time with. Right? That's the introduction, a minute. Notice how it's going? 1/5. The voice needs to last for a minute. Really clear things, and you need to decide these beforehand. It needs to be clear in your head, are you using first person or third person? You don't leave that till later and experiment and see what happens and see what crops up. You decide up front. You need to know whether you're past or present tense. You've got to decide that up front, and you've got to have reasons for it. And I need to know in this presentation, what are the reasons for that? Why did you choose it? Are you choosing present tense because it's more immediate? Are you using past tense because you want the distance of time? What is the tense that you're going to use? The point of view, usually, generally speaking, the point of view is from the main character. But you can, if you wish, use the omniscient viewpoint, and you can write from different characters' points of view. But you do need to decide that up front. So if you're going to write, for instance, from the villain's point of view, to give us some insight into that person's reasoning, then you need to state that up front. All right? Of course you can experiment later on, but I need to know what decisions you've made right at this point. Some books have lots of dialect in them. They have the main character has a particular way of speaking. Some writers use very short sentences. Some writers use longer, more elaborate sentences. Some writers use lots of imagery. Decide what kind of language you're going to be using and state it up front. Now again, you can change that later, but I want some decisions made now, and that presented it to us. And how is this language going to, the choice of diction, the choice of syntax, how is this going to define and indicate character for us? The story world is really important. You've made some decisions already. In your presentation, please give us a clear idea for a minute about the milieu, the story world, the whole social and cultural setup that the story takes place in. Decide as many details as you can, even if it were to be set in contemporary Baltimore, even if it were going to be set in a contemporary Baltimore private preparatory school, you still need to be aware of what are the cultural features here, what is the story world, what makes up the story world. Go back to the materials I put on the website, please, and rely on those in order to make those decisions. I will know in the presentation if you haven't done that, and you will lose marks for it. I'm after the plot development here, by which I don't want for you telling me the story for a minute. That's not what I want. If I want to know the story, I'll read the book, all right? I want kind of what is the arc of the story? Where's it going? What's it about? What happens to the characters? Who changes in this story and who doesn't? Does the world change? If it's a story, for instance, about, I don't know, saving the world, then how is it different at the end? Is the world saved or is the world lost? But how is the world different? That's the arc of the story, not the day-by-day events. Thrill a minute? Well, it might not be, but it might be. But what I want you to give me in this presentation is a sense of where does the excitement come from for you in terms of writing it. If you're not excited about writing this story, then it's going to be hard work. So give me a sense of what you are excited about writing, even to the extent of nominating specific scenes that you're really looking forward to writing it. So what is the form of this? What's it going to look like? Now my ideal, and I know this is being a bit Pollyanna-ish, my ideal would be a kind of a multimedia presentation where you use not just a PowerPoint, not just pictures, not just talking, but a mixture of all three used appropriately. You can still get top marks by not doing that, but that would be my ideal. It needs to be fluent. It needs to be spoken, not read. Please, please, please do not read from a screen. Do not read from a piece of paper. I want it not learned word by word, but I want you to own this presentation. Of course, you can use prompts on a screen or a piece of paper to move on to the next one, just as I am with this presentation. I've got the slideshow up in front of me to remind me what it is that I'm moving on to. You can do that, but you're not going to read it. You're going to present it. You're going to engage us with eye contact and make it interesting for us. You have to own it. Now, if you choose not to do the presentation, then you can. That's still valid, but you will have a point penalty for it. So you just be aware of that when you make your decision. So this is the grading scale, right? Starting from the bottom. I won't read these out loud because you can read them online and study them in some detail. But it's going to go from an F, which is kind of really not very many decisions made, not much presentation, up to a D. Right, and you can read these online. Make sure that when you do your presentation, you take this grading scale into account, so that when you do it, you can say, well, my presentation looks like this one. To a C minus and a D. Really, these mid-range ones, the C minus, the D, that kind of mid-range is about. It's just been a little bit better than the one lower down. So read that in detail, please. And we got through a C. We got through a B minus and a C. All these apply whether it's a verbal presentation or whether it's a written piece that you hand to me. However, as it says at the bottom of this, look, if you do not do the verbal oral presentation, you cannot get above a B, I'm afraid. Yeah, sorry, that's it. This B grade must last at least 3 minutes. That's one of the important criteria. But you can read the rest online. The actual presentation online. Study them, make sure that you're familiar with them, so you know what your presentation is going to look like. And then it moves up. That's additional qualities that you're giving it for an A minus or a B plus. And then we're getting up into an A range. There's a full description there of what an A grade presentation looks like. Has to last 4 to 5 minutes. Has to fulfill all of the criteria that I put on this presentation. It has to be, you have to actively engage the interest of the audience, looking up, not reading. Just as I am with this, I'm not reading out of that, but I'm able to present what it is that I'm saying. Now, if you cannot also get an A+, which is a very high flying grade, between 95 and 100. To get that, there must be a certain flair over and above. So it's impossible to quantify what that extra kind of flair will look like. But it has a certain je ne sais quoi, as the French say, where I go, wow, that was good. It covers all of the bases, but there's something else as well in terms of presentation. Okay, so that's the criteria for your presentation. I hope that's clear. It should be clear, even if only from the grade descriptions. And you've got until, remember, the Friday before. Actually, we will arrange a schedule as to when you're going to present these in the last few classes coming up to November the 1st. Now, if you want to, you can just present it to me. If you're nervous about presenting to the rest of the class, you can arrange a time just to present it to me. And if you do that, you can't really get above an A grade. You can't get an A+. It'll be more like in the A minus range. All right. So I hope that's clear. I hope that's exciting. It's going to be a very, very useful tool for solidifying your novel ideas.